The games that do the best. God damn these fucking Mexicans ruining my fucking show. Anyway,
he's got the leaf blower out now.
What the fuck?
I think they heard you in this. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Radio Free America. I've got the one, the only Turd Flinging monkey here. Sorry for the mix-up before. Technical difficulties.
No, don't. It was my fault. I got sidetracked. I was working on my newsletter. I got sucked down a rabbit hole and completely lost track of time. I was late. Halsey's just trying to be a good host and blaming technology, but no, I'm just a shitty person who was late.
It's all good, man. It's all good. You know, we're still getting to do a stream tonight, and everything is all good in the sun. The link to, if you have any questions for us, the link to Super Chat is in the chat. It's in the description of the video. Also, just to plug my book that's coming out in June, Conspiracy Theory, The History of Social Control in the United States, will be available on Amazon, my website, radiofreeamerica.com, and a couple other sellers. It'll be in Kindle. It'll be all over the place. So, man, what's up? What's going on with you? Any good rabbit holes, or just typical?
I mean, this is, if you want me to talk about it, I will. It's regarding the possible recession. So there's two narratives happening in the markets. You have the recession narrative and you have the inflation narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So the recession narrative is that these bank failures are going to cause a financial crisis. It's going to cause an economic collapse. And then after the collapse, inflation's going to get wiped out because of the recession. Everything's going to crash. You want to be in cash, maybe short-term duration bonds, and that's it. And that's where you should be. You should be in bonds and cash. Everything's going down. Abandon ship. That's the recession narrative. The inflation narrative is that, okay, so the bank bailouts have already happened. So, like, if you look at 2007,
the initial ones, they're reporting now that they're talking to a third one that's about to fail, and they recently did a study that 200 more are in trouble.
Right, but that's my point. So, if you go back to 2007, 2008,
mm-hmm.
You had a recession. I don't have the timeline in front of me. You had a recession, I want to say in September, or no, July. July was the beginning of the recession. Then in August or September, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac went bankrupt and had to get bailed out.
Right.
Then the next month, the stock market crashed. Then a month after that, the banks were bailed out. So there was like a 4-month gap. And the bank bailouts didn't happen the same day. There was like a month gap between the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, stock market, then the banks bail out. They're bailing out the banks the same day. The same day. Like they didn't even let Credit Suisse go under. Like they basically bailed it out in real time. The day it was crashing, the central bank swooped in and then backstopped selling them to UBS. So there's no gap. Like so usually there's like a crash and there's like a month or two where everyone's freaking out and then the government does something. No, they're like pouncing the same day. So the bank bailouts have already happened. They're going to continue to happen the same day. So there's not like, if you're like going to be in cash or bonds waiting for the big crash, you can pounce on all these deals. The banks are basically stepping in the same day. We've already done QE. There's a little bit of a disagreement between certain people who think that because so what QE is, let me define QE. QE stands for quantitative easing.
Yep.
And it's when the Fed buys the bonds and mortgage-backed securities off the banks. Now, when they're doing official QE, it's to stimulate the economy. Now, this doesn't actually stimulate the economy. This is basically Keynesian bullshit. What it does is it creates bank reserves, which go into asset prices. It doesn't actually create inflation or fight inflation.
Yeah, I mean, it does have some stimulatory effects because of interest rates. But those stimulatory effects are usually negated out by other aspects. But I hear you.
It's mostly like the tail wagging the dog.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the way the Fed will run its mouth to like create sentiment, and not actually do anything, but because they ran their mouth, the investors will react, and that alone moves the market. So like that's the Fed. Like 99% of what the Fed does to affect the economy is just run their mouth and just get people to react based on sentiment. Anyway, the QE is happening, and people are denying it. They're saying it's not QE because they're not doing it to stimulate the economy. They're doing it to save the banks. It's like it doesn't matter why they're doing it. It matters that they're doing it.
Sure.
So the QE's already started. The bank bailouts have already happening. They're happening in real time. They're doing it like as the banks are failing. So the narrative for the recession, or the recession narrative, relies on this idea that like the Fed and the government are going to let the economy fail in order to fight inflation. And I don't know how this is obvious to me. I don't know why it's not obvious to others. If the Fed was going to crash the economy in order to, because they've been alluding to this, that they were, there's going to be a soft landing, but there's going to be some job losses and unemployment's going to go up, but that's what they're shooting for. They're going to like ease the country into like a soft recession, but that's kind of bullshit. Like job growth is actually pretty strong. It's actually, we're at full employment and unemployment is going down. So,
you see, I have an issue with people that are saying this, and what I'm about to say is almost completely anecdotal, but at the same time, I know a ton of people that are out of work that can't find new jobs. And these aren't like worthless people. These are people that have like decent resumes, they've had decent jobs, like they're not lazy or right-wing lunatics or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, a lot of people are out of work. A lot of companies aren't hiring, and I mean, at least in tech, the layoffs are ridiculous.
Well, there was a report, I put this in my newsletter. The tech unemployment rate is actually going down. It's at 1.8, and it said 70% of laid off tech workers find a new job within 3 months. So that's just what the numbers say. Like there is there could be anecdotal evidence. It's also very location based. So if you live in like Iowa and Wisconsin posted their unemployment rates today, and they're below 3%. They have like 2.7, 2.9% unemployment, which is crazy. Anything below 4% is full employment. But California's unemployment rate ticked up. So it depends on like what state you're in, and like if you're in a very tech heavy sector, you're probably going to have more unemployment than if you're in a sector that does more agriculture and stuff like that.
Just to interrupt you real quick, I've been telling people this just as like kind of a public service announcement. That area of Ohio where they're building that massive chip plant that Biden's always talking about, they're also building like 20 new other plants. They are dying for workers out there to the point where they're willing to pay you to move out there, train, and have like a guaranteed 2-year contract minimum. So if you're like struggling with life right now and have the ability to move, Ohio is the place to be.
Well, that's the thing. We have a very tight labor market. So there might be people.
We always have, though. Just so you know, that's not new.
Well, no, so anything below 4% unemployment is full employment. You want to have some unemployed people because you want to move people where they're, like if this industry is shedding workers, but this industry is desperately in need of workers, the way to facilitate that transfer of labor is through a moderate unemployment rate. So you don't want to go too far below 4%, because then the labor market freezes because nobody can find workers. And like you were saying, like you might be in a high tech area, like a big tech center, and you want to get another job in your local area, but nobody's hiring because that local industry is kind of frozen. Like, for example, if you work in banking or real estate, your job is gone because the entire, like, the loan market is frozen.
My wife's best friend, her husband, he's worked at a bank for, I want to say 15 years, just got his walking papers for and he's not, as I said, there's nothing wrong with him. So, I mean, I've never worked with him, so I can't tell you, but
they'll hire him. So here's the thing. The banks, and especially real estate based businesses like realtors or whatever, they make their money facilitating transactions.
Sure.
So right now, the entire market is frozen. If you have a house, you're not selling it because interest rates are so high. And I mean, relatively speaking, they're not really high historically, but relatively speaking, interest rates are very high. Your only way you're going to sell your house is if you come down on the price, so that that the interest rate and the value kind of equal out, so people can afford it. But everyone knows the Fed's going to cut rates soon. So if you're a homeowner and you want to sell your house, you're just going to hold on to it for a year. You'd rather pay the property taxes for another year and take that loss than deduct hundreds of thousands of dollars off of your house value in order to sell it in this market with interest rates at like 6 or 7%. So even people who want to sell their house are taking their houses off the market. The people who, and so nobody's buying, nobody's selling. The market's completely frozen, and it's all because of the uncertainty. Well, I don't know how you describe it, because it's not uncertainty. Like, people are expecting the Fed to cut rates very soon, so everyone's just waiting for that. You have a lot of cash buyers waiting for the Fed to stop hiking rates, and they're going to go in and start buying real estate for cash. But most people need a loan, but they don't want to get a loan at like 6 or 7%, and the homeowners don't want to come down on their price and lose money like months before the Fed cuts rates, and then be out hundreds of thousands of dollars. So the entire real estate market's frozen. The used car market is better, but it's still pretty bad for the same reason. Again, interest rates are too high. So because the banks make their money on transactions, because loan origination is basically non-existent, they have to lay people off. It's like, if the business dries up at your company, they have to start firing workers. Now they'll hire them back once the Fed cuts rates and once people start coming in for loans again. But right now, it's, if the Fed was saying rates are going to 5% and they're going to be there for years and years and years, and they're never going to be 2% again, then you would see people go out and get loans, because the expectation would be this is the new normal. But that's not the expectation. The expectation is the Fed's going to start cutting rates as early as like July.
I've heard the same.
So why would you go out and buy a house now, or why would you sell your house now in March and lose hundreds of thousands of dollars when you can just hold out until July and sell it for full price?
You see, the area where I live in has always been odd. Like, even in the heart of the mortgage crisis in 2008, all that happens around here is that the rate of growth slows a little bit. Like, the market never goes down here.
Well, so when it comes to real estate, every market is local. Like,
right.
You can't really you can't just say the real estate market like in broad strokes, because every single market has its own unique kind of characteristics. My larger point is that the layoffs you're seeing in the economy they come from two sources. They're either directly related to interest rates, like banking jobs and real estate jobs, or they're tech companies that overhired over the last 2 years. And they aren't even going back to their 2019 levels or their 2020 levels. So like, they hired and this is basically a product of growth investing. So you're a company, let's say you're a tech company, and you have a good product, you have a good team, you're good. But then, because it's a speculative mania and the government is showering money upon people and they're all trying to buy stock, all of a sudden these investors are beating a path to your door, throwing money at you, saying, here, take this money and turn it into more money. Now, what they demand is growth. They want to see the numbers on your balance sheet go up. They want to see the size of the company go up. They want to see employees go up. They don't care if your company's actually got a good niche and you don't need to hire these people. You have to hire these people. That's what the investors expect. And you have a fiduciary duty to maximize returns to the investors. So you don't have a choice. Like, so the investors are demanding that you grow this company, even if there's really no reason for you to do so. So you take their money and you buy more office space and you hire a bunch of people, and they do fucking nothing. This is where all those TikTok videos of these girls running around saying like a day in the life of, working at this company, and they don't do shit all day.
Except for like drink lattes and wine and eat free food.
Right. So that was all facilitated by all these investors just pouring their money into tech companies. And the thing is when the tech company reported their quarterly earnings, the company was growing, and that's all that mattered. So this is just a kind of a boom and bust cycle when it comes to tech. But if you notice, if you look at the actual numbers, like even like places like Amazon, they hired a bunch of people in 2020 and 2021, and they fired some of them, but they're actually still net up from 2020.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're firing. It's not like they're going back to like 2019 levels. This is just they're basically you got to understand during 2020 and 2021, so much goddamn money flowed into the stock market.
Oh, yeah.
Like you saw all these companies like Amazon, Tesla. You were seeing newly minted billionaires at least once a month.
For sure.
So that's where these tech jobs these people being laid off. This is basically now that the investor money is drying up, now that the stock prices are going down, they're just getting rid of all the employees that the investors made them hire in the first place. But they're actually keeping the good ones. Like this is actually a healthy kind of it's like when you work out and you get your muscles big, but then you have like the lactic acid, you got to take some time off, let it heal. That's all this. There's nothing unhealthy going on with these tech layoffs. And again, the tech unemployment rate is under 2%. And 70% of these tech workers who do get laid off can find a job within 3 months. So they're really people who are like trying to scream fire and talking about this is it, this is the end. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. We are at full employment. The banks are being bailed. The banks that do get into trouble are being bailed out the same day. They're being, in fact, the Fed and the Treasury just opened up a discount window to allow banks to basically borrow like right now. So they're basically preempting this banking crisis. All this is being facilitated with printed money.
Oh, yeah.
So we're printing money. We're bailing out banks. We're already at the post-crash, not quite stimulus, but we're at the where we were bailing out the banks. The stimulus in 2008 took place over like many years because the unemployment rate went up to like 10+%, and it kind of stayed there until like 2011. So like here's the thing, like this is the other reality. Let's put all that aside. Let's put the Fed aside, the banks, the QE, the labor market. Let's put all that aside. Let's look at the political realities, the geopolitical realities. We are in an economic war with Russia.
100%. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
No
like,
ands, ifs, or buts. So, and we have a presidential election next year. Now, even if we take it for granted that the Democrats are going to steal the election using mail-in voting, they at least need plausible deniability. If they cause a fucking recession and they cause unemployment to go to 10% to fight inflation, you're going to see the approval numbers of the Biden administration and Democrats just shit the bed.
They're already at the lowest point they've been since he took office.
But now throw on an economic recession, and this is the difference. This is a huge difference. Sometimes a crisis just happens, falls into your lap, and you're just like caught off guard, and a lot of people are hurt, and you do the best you can. But this is a self-imposed recession. This is the Fed, who was approved by Biden. This is Biden, the Biden administration's Federal Reserve and the Treasury, deliberately causing a recession and getting massive amounts of people fired the year before an election.
It's true.
And if you look at 2008, it took years for the unemployment rate to go down again. It went from 5% to 10%, and then it just slowly kind of ramped down from like 10 one year, and then 9 the next year, and 8 the next year, and it took years to get down. So, and there's a huge difference between a crisis that falls in your lap and something you fucked up and you broke it. So like if the Fed crashes the economy and causes a recession, that is the government doing it to you. It's not that this just happened out of the sky and the government just, didn't know what they were doing. Like they did this to you deliberately. So everyone who loses their job, they're going to look at Biden and Powell and be like, what did you do to me? Like I had a good paying job and you got me fired to fight inflation. Like, bitch, prices are still high. Go fuck yourself. Give me my job back. And you're going to see all the approval numbers crash, and all the blaming of Trump isn't going to do shit. He hasn't been president for 4 years, and black riots aren't going to save him. Like, so the reality is, number one, it's not looking like we're in a recession in the first place. All the estimates I'm seeing, we're going to have positive GDP this quarter. I think what I can't remember what branch of the Fed it is, but there's a Fed, there's one of the Federal Reserve building guys who they're estimating it's going to be positive like 3%, which is fine. It's like 3.2%.
Oh, that's New
So if
York.
we,
New York says that. So does
uh,
Illinois.
I think it was, I want to say Kentucky, but I didn't want to speak out of turn. It doesn't matter. So if we have positive GDP, we can't be in a recession by July. That the consensus by the normies was that we're going to have a recession by July. And so that's what everybody's buckling up for. But if we have a positive GDP quarter, we can't be in recession by July because you need 2 back-to-back negative quarters to be even in a technical recession. But to be in a confirmed recession, you also have to have high unemployment. And we were at full employment, and the unemployment rate is going down. So now you could say the Fed's lying, these numbers are fake, the government's trying to massage the numbers. That all could be true. Like, I make a joke in my newsletter that the people who are the recession narrative people are saying the government's lying about the labor numbers. The inflation narrative people are saying the government is lying about the inflation numbers and manipulating commodity prices. One of these people are right, one of these people are wrong. My point is, though, is like, if you just look at the geopolitical realities, deliberately causing a recession and getting massive amounts of people fired on purpose the year before an election while in an economic war against Russia. And this isn't just like a ho-hum, like Afghanistan war, we could walk away and lose and nothing really significant comes of it. Losing to Russia is the end of the American empire. It's already falling apart. Countries are already abandoning us and switching sides because they sense the weakness. If we actually no shit lose to Russia and have to basically like call it off and go home, the world will absolutely lose respect for the United States. What I mean by respect, I mean fear. Like right now, the world puts up with a lot of bullshit from America because they're afraid of what America will do to them economically and militarily. But if Russia wins,
Which they are.
which they are, they're in the process of. If America accept it, so that's why there's all this doubling down. Like they're going to send F-16s to Ukraine, and they're going to send cluster bombs and depleted uranium. Like they're really escalating because they really can't afford to lose this. They really can't afford to have an economic downturn and a major recession and let Russia win the economic war as well as the ground war. That'll be a total blowout for NATO if Russia, because this isn't just the United States, this is NATO. Imagine Russia just single-handedly embarrassing all of NATO at the same time. And the thing about Russia is they're not even the number 2 military; they're number 3. China's number 2.
Yeah, but you know what?
So,
Everyone under us are all generally the same. Like they have their numbers of military spending and capabilities are very similar.
well, sure, yeah. Well, they all use NATO. Well, when you join NATO, they basically want your equipment to be up to the NATO
No,
standard.
but I mean like China, Russia, Britain, France. Like they're all generally the same. It's only us that spends a redonkulous amount of money on military spending. Like we spend more than the next 10 countries combined.
Well, so the bad news about that is like all that spending, it doesn't actually make our military better.
No,
It
not at
mostly
all.
it mostly is just it's a big money hole to the military industrial complex to over engineer our equipment so that they can basically milk the taxpayer for infinite money. So instead of build, that like you look at these, tanks, whatever, like pick a thing. We over engineer the shit out of something, make it cost 20 times what it realistically should. And then it's all paid for with taxpayer money because, that's the one thing both sides of the aisle can agree on is military spending. No one wants to cut military spending. So it's just a blank check to the military industrial complex. So we spend a lot on our military equipment and everything, but we overpay to hell. It's all we're not really getting our money's worth. If you look at like the quality of our equipment and what we're getting versus like maybe what China and Russia are getting, and I don't have the numbers. I don't know. But I've seen the waste, fraud, and abuse. It's everywhere. We're overpaying for everything. So the fact that we spend so much shouldn't be taken as, oh, we're spending so much money. Obviously, that means our military is like from the future, and we got like laser guns and teleporters and shit. No, we don't.
Dude, there have been military contracts where in public hearings, the financial departments of the military spending units come back and say, we allocated $87 for this bolt and we're getting it for $27. And while we're happy to keep the extra money, we don't want to get accused of like scamming the taxpayer. So how do we give it back? And they're like, no, 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 that was budgeted for that at $87. That's what you keep.
Right. Well, and also when I was in the military, at the end of the year, there's like a frantic race to spend all the money because if you don't spend all the money you were budgeted, they're going to cut your budget next year. So people are incentivized to waste money because, like, let's say you were budgeted $100,000, just use round numbers, and you only spent 70. And that's all you need. Like, mission accomplished. You did everything you need to do with only 70. Well, they're going to look at that and be like, oh, you only spent 70. Well, we're going to cut your budget to 70. And then what if next year you need 80 because something happened or you needed to upgrade something or repair something? So, like, you don't want your budget cut. So you're incentivized by the way the system works to waste as much money as possible to make sure you spend every penny of that 100,000. And then, of course, and also, this is so stupid. You also ask for more than you need because what the government does is they only give you a percentage of what you ask for, and then they call that a cut. So if you need 100,000, you ask for 150,000, and then they say we're only going to give you 100,000, and then they mark it down that like they cut spending by X amount. It's the gayest, fakest shit ever, but that's the way the government works. So I was there. I've seen it. I'm not saying America, like the American military, sucks or anything. I'm just saying that the amount of money we spent shouldn't be misconstrued into like, oh, we spend like 20 times more than Russia and China. That means our military is 20 times better. No,
Not even close.
No, it is not. There's a very severe. And that's the thing about that's the thing about government in general. It just you have all the mostly private corporations because like the military they get paid a fixed amount.
Yeah, but the majority of spending is on three things. One, the VA. Two, the personnel that they hire, either civilian or military. So it's just human resources and outside contracts.
The outside contracts is basically where most of the work gets done. The government knows they're stupid and incompetent, so they always they subcontract to private companies, and then the companies know the government's going to dick with them and fuck, so they always overcharge them. It's just a big, and the thing that the government, because of Keynesianism, they look at it as a good thing. They look at wasting money as like this is creating jobs. It's the multiplier effect. It's really, really insidious, and that's like. Even if you're not a net taxpayer, if if let's say you pay your taxes, but you get most of it back at the end of the year, and you pay very little, okay, cool. You're still paying for it with inflation.
Sure.
Like when the government prints money and spend, because we've reached the end of the road, especially now. China's dumping our bonds. China was our biggest buyer of bonds, and they are dumping the U.S. bonds because they know it's only a matter of time before the United States seizes their assets the way they seized Russia's assets. And once they do, those bonds aren't going to be worth anything. So China's dumping them. They're buying gold. Even though these bonds, they could buy a 5% bond. They don't care. They'd rather buy gold than a government bond paying 5% because they don't want the U.S., turning their money off and freezing and seizing their assets like they did with Russia. But without foreign buyers, if the only people buying the bonds are
us,
Europe, and the Fed, well, anytime the Fed buys the bond, that's just monetizing the debt.
Which is why they're actually so quick to deal with the banks right now, because all they're doing is buying bonds that are going to take a while to pay off at par value.
No, look, I don't envy Jerome Powell. He's in a no-win
Oh, no.
situation. There's nothing, and the thing is, he didn't even do anything bad. Like, the problems with the inflation weren't caused by the Fed at all. They were caused by the government and the stimmy checks and the eviction moratorium and the unemployment bonus, and that's what caused the inflation. None of that had to do with the Fed, but the government, in order to take responsibility off of them, created this narrative that the Fed caused the inflation with low interest rates, and thus they're fighting inflation with high interest rates. But if the Fed caused inflation with low interest rates, why was there no significant inflation from 2009 to 2021? Because there wasn't. Like, inflation went down, it was like 2%, even though interest rates were near zero. So where was the inflation? All that was just, it was asset price inflation. So the stock market went up, real estate went up. No one complained about that. Nobody complains when the stock market hits all-time highs and, home values go up, because it makes everybody feel rich. So when the Fed lowers interest rates, that's what happens. It doesn't actually cause inflation. The government caused inflation. But the government doesn't want to take responsibility because they're not cutting any spending. Welfare isn't getting cut, subsidies aren't getting cut, deficits aren't shrinking. No spending is being cut. And all this spending is being paid for with printed money. And we're still we already hit the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling has been hit.
Oh, they're in supposedly, which I find hilarious because we still are finding billions of dollars to give to Ukraine. But we're in what they call extraordinary measures. If they don't raise the debt ceiling by a couple months from now, supposedly we'll have a default.
What they're doing is they're raiding the pension systems of government employees.
Right.
So they're borrowing. Yeah, they're borrowing all the money in the pension system, and they pinky promise to pay it back once the debt ceiling gets raised. But we're at the end of the road. And it's all Biden's fault. That you can't blame any of this on Trump. Biden was the one who decided to provoke a war with Russia. He was the one who decided to, kick them off the SWIFT system, seize and freeze their foreign reserves. That's what spelled the death for the dollar. China's dumping our bonds. Everyone is running to BRICS. Even Mexico is running to BRICS.
Right.
Which is going to cause, we're going to have to go to war with Mexico to keep them from joining BRICS. So we don't have the money. We don't have the soldiers.
We don't have the political will.
We don't have. Yeah. This is the end. This is how it all ends.
This is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause.
Well, it's the opposite. This is how and I'm going to call the American Empire the Big Gay, which stands for the big global American empire, but it's like an acronym. So the Big Gay is ending. This is how Rome collapsed. This is how it always goes. Now, I don't think anybody's going to invade us and conquer us. It's going to be like what happened when, by the time Rome collapsed, the Germanic barbarians were already basically ruling over the land anyway.
Right. It just formalized what was already in existence.
Yeah. They basically burned down Rome and burned down whatever the city that the child emperor was staying in. I can't remember the name of the city. And then they sent the regalia to the Byzantines and says, hey, we don't need this anymore. They didn't want to go through the motions. You know what? We don't need this shit. You go ahead and take this little flag and this bullshit. We got this. But it was already kind of that's what was happening anyway. The Romans had lost control of the Western Empire. Even in the days of Majorian, there was I think his name was Ricimer, or he was basically he was considered he was essentially the real power in Rome at the time, but because he was German, he couldn't rule. They wouldn't the Senate wouldn't allow him to be emperor or have any station, so they made him the leader of the military, and he basically was the kingmaker. So he would always appoint puppets who basically do what he said, and he kind of ruled behind the scenes. And that was while the empire was still there. You had these Germanic warlords kind of, creating puppets to rule through them. So that's what you're seeing. The empire is dead. You're just seeing I can't think of a better metaphor than Biden. He's the perfect metaphor for the United States right now.
He really is, because he perfectly exemplifies everything that's wrong with what's going on. And when you look at like the Republicans who love to talk about how they're gonna, rein in government spending and cut by, like, basically Biden is doing what we always knew he would do, in that with the debt ceiling kind of up in the air, all he's doing is picking apart the Republicans' like ability to negotiate one issue at a time. Like he goes to the press and says, "Oh, they're going to cut Social Security." Then he goes to the press and says, "Oh, they're going to cut Medicare. Oh, they're going to cut the IRS. Oh, they're going to cut this." And they're getting to the point now where there's not even anything to negotiate about. Either we spend all the money that we don't have, or we cut something and lose our jobs. That's basically like the government's attitude right now.
Right. Well, my larger point was these two narratives, the recession narrative and the inflation narrative. The inflation narrative is the data lines up with the inflation narrative, not the recession narrative. So everyone who's crowing about like, oh my God, like the economy's going to collapse. No, it isn't. The banks are going to get bailed out in real time with printed money. Unemployment isn't, other than select industries that are very sensitive to interest rate hikes. It's fine. And these interest rates, by the way, 5%, even before the bank failures, Jerome Powell indicated that 5% was like the terminal rate. So he said like back when interest rates were like 4.5, he said they're going to raise it a couple times, like 25 basis points to get to 5% and then pause and like wait for inflation to come down. And he said after he just raised 25 basis points this last time during the press conference, he said that they're going to update their forward guidance and they're going to hold back and see how things go. So like the bank failures literally changed nothing. They were going to do this anyway.
Yeah, because this is just a backdoor way for them to monetize the debt. Because by buying the bonds at par, they're just buying the bonds that they would have bought if they decided to formally monetize the debt anyway.
Right. Because if there's a crisis, there's no objections.
Of course.
If they started monetizing the debt, people are like, what the fuck are you doing? But oh my God, there's banks failing. Quick, buy those bonds, make these banks, solvent again. So it's the Fed is not going to deliberately cause a recession and cause unemployment to go to like 6, 7, 8% the year before a major election while we're in an existential economic war with Russia. That's just not going to happen. So there's no other road for us to go down other than inflation. Now, the big question is like, okay, but if you look at, like gold just hit $2,000, but natural gas is still like about $2 right now. It's at 30-year lows adjusted for inflation. Oil's down. Like, when are those going to go up? Like, look, soon. Like right now, the markets are the precious metals market's most manipulated market, but because of the economic war with Russia, because Russia is such a major energy exporter, the government's added energy to that kind of basket of manipulated commodities. And the thing is it doesn't work. If the government could just hold down commodity prices through manipulation and bullshit, every government would. You would never see a government have hyperinflation. You'd never see governments have financial crises. If they could simply, with a stroke of a pen, make things, cheaper and more abundant. That's just not how anything works. The government can't print oil and gas and food. It has to buy them.
No, the only thing they can do is price controls.
They could do price controls and they can ration, but they can only do price controls and ration if they produce it themselves. They can't tell this is the dumbest shit. Europe is trying to form a buyer's cartel. So they'll like use their buying power to force producers to give them a deal. And it's like, that's not how any of this works.
Yeah, but they had success doing that with the pharma industries.
But those pharma industries are based in like the West. They're based in like they're Europe and they're based in America. So you can pressure companies that are domiciled in your country. Like you could pass laws, you can squeeze their CEO, you can give them, under the table deals. But what you can't do is you can't go to the Middle East and tell them, hey, we're not going to buy your oil unless you give us a deal. And then the Middle East will be like, okay, we'll sell it to China. Go fuck yourself. And they'll be like, uh-oh, we weren't expecting them to do that. It's
And
like,
there's no
well,
amount of oil that China won't buy.
yeah, it's the game is over. And what I find shocking is they're still moving forward with their Great Reset, climate change bullshit as everything is falling apart. It's like, are you just not aware of what's going on? Or are you just like, this is the plan, I got to stick to the plan, this is what I'm, I got to follow orders, and they're just oblivious to the fact that the war in Ukraine is being lost. The banks are failing. CBDC is not ready. It's going to be unveiled in July, but it's not July. So they got to get to July before they can even launch CBDC. And the big coup de grace is China. China is my hunch is China's going to launch the BRICS. They're either going to launch a BRICS currency, or it looks like in their negotiations with Putin the other day, they're just going to use the Chinese yuan as the reserve currency, at least temporarily. And
Well, there's no hazard. There's no hazard to doing that because the yuan is pretty much pegged to the dollar.
Well, but here's the thing. Like, and I made this point. I don't know if I made it on Wednesday, but you might have been out like doing something. You missed this. In the 70s, when Nixon closed the gold window and basically screwed over Europe and basically killed the Bretton Woods system, Europe was so dependent on the dollar that when Nixon altered the deal, there wasn't anything Europe could do. They just had to basically take it because there was no alternative. They did create the euro after that. That was one of the things that created the impetus to create the euro. But if you haven't noticed, the euro is even worse than the dollar. So they tried to basically stick it to America for screwing them over in the 70s by abandoning Bretton Woods and closing the gold window. But then they got stupid and greedy, and like the euro was even a bigger joke than the dollar. But now America's going to do it again. America's like, we're at the end of the road. We have to screw over our bondholders. We have to screw over our creditors and basically tell them to eat shit and just alter the deal and pray that we don't alter it any further, just like we did with Bretton Woods, just like we always do. Except this time, there will be an alternative. So last time there was no alternative. Everyone just had to suck it up. But this time there's going to be an alternative. And you could see basically everyone other than the Anglo-Saxon former British Empire countries, they're lining up to join BRICS, all of them. The Middle East, South America, Asia, Africa, everyone. And like, I'm sure this figure needs to be updated, but last time I checked, I saw a report like a week ago saying that based on the current applications to BRICS, the BRICS nations will control 70% of global GDP and 80% of the global population.
Sure, so I mean, any industry where it's dominated by America, they're just going to be able to have a very soft entry because of all the extra money and all the rise in prices. Because America still refines 81% of the world's oil. We even refine oil for people that we won't do business with. But that's easily solved if countries are willing to, or industries in other countries are willing to invest in infrastructure.
And that's what's happening. Like, that's so one of the big things, like right now, what's happening with China. So again, it takes time for these gears to move, but when they move,
they keep like moving.
They're not going to stop moving. If you say you're sorry, they're not going to stop moving. So like what America did, not just freezing and seizing Russia's reserves, but blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. And then even though that was a German pipeline, and that was also an ecological terrorist attack, and it was like, all that shit. The Europeans knew America did it and then covered it up. So like they're in on it. So like Russia's done. Like Russia wanted to work with Europe, but America's like, oh, we don't like Europe cozying up to Russia. Let's blow up German property and let's provoke a war and let's like make sure we can control Europe. And so, and even Switzerland, I'm really disappointed in Switzerland abandoning their centuries old, neutrality in order to throw their lot in with NATO. And then you have all the Scandinavian countries all like petitioning to join NATO. All, like everyone's like they were tripping over themselves to become America's bitch. And that's fine, except now the rest of the world is like we're getting fucked over here. Like this strong dollar is fucking us. This just everything. Like we're tired of America fucking us, and so there's going to be an alternative, and the world will choose it. Maybe like Western Europe, America, Canada, and Australia will stay together, but it's going to be like Rome, where they're gonna lose control of the world, and at that point, if nobody wants the dollar, what do we have to maintain any semblance of a standard of living, a first world standard of living? We have nothing. We're gonna have to go back at least to like I don't know an early 1900 standard of living. We're gonna have to rebuild the factories. We're gonna have to start farming again. We're gonna have to start doing everything ourselves because we're not gonna be able to just trade pieces of paper for the world's resources anymore.
Music to my ears.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess people will be like, "Man, Ted Kaczynski was right. We should have industrialization was a mistake." But that's the future, and yeah, I don't know. The problem with commodities prices is they will go up when the government loses control. When the
Sure.
government loses, but it's not like the supply side is getting worse. Demand is going nowhere. There's some worry like, oh, if there's a huge economic crash, we could see demand for like oil and energy go up. It's like, yeah, but that's not going to happen. So demand's going nowhere, supply's worse than ever, and yet prices are at 30-year lows, at least in natural gas. It's so stupid. But this can't last. I don't know when it's going to break. I don't know when they'll twist it so hard that it breaks off. I don't know.
Whenever that first person gets a copy of their termination, that's when it'll change.
Well, it's when usually there's an event. Like the event for the inflation was the COVID stimmies and all that stuff. Like, like there's an event that happens that creates a crisis and then it just breaks. Like you can, it's like I'll use an analogy. Let's say you're fat and you're wearing a shirt that's like it's too small. You're like wearing it like it's glued to you,
Showing off your titties.
yeah, you got like muffin top, you got your belly button sticking out, but you're in complete denial and you're like wearing this shirt insisting that you're a medium. And eventually what'll happen is you'll bend over and then you'll split the shirt in half. And that's the event. Like there'll be an event where like right now we're the fat guy wearing the tight shirt who's in complete denial that like you don't fit in this shirt, dude. You need to like go put on a 3X or something. But we're in complete denial. We're rocking this little kid shirt. But eventually we're gonna like twist or bend over or something, and then there's gonna be a loud ripping sound, and then all those rolls will just spill out. All those man titties, all that Michelin man, it'll just spill out everywhere. And that's what's going to happen to inflation and commodities prices. I want to say like by the summer, but just like with winter, Europe bought a shit ton of coal, and America was importing a lot of Canadian natural gas in order to prepare for the winter. And then it turned out to be a fairly mild winter. But they were prepared. Even if it was a really bad winter, they could have bullshitted their way through the winter with coal and imported natural gas to claim that our reserves are strong and still drive prices down. So they have tricks in their tool belt to kind of bullshit the market as long as they can, but something will happen eventually. I'm guessing sooner rather than later. But it's not. It's going to be caused by China. It's not going to be or China or Russia. It's not going to be like. It's not going to be something that's just going to happen by itself. Like what they can control, they're really good at controlling things as long as they have absolute control. Like when it comes to the media and COVID and elections, they have all that shit locked down. But they can't control what China and Russia do. They can't control what the Middle East does. Like everything outside of their control, they're basically, it's all fucked. Like Omicron curing COVID, monkeypox not becoming the pandemic they needed it to be. So like they have a history of failure, but in all those failures, it's because it wasn't really in their control. But when it's things they do control, like the media, elections and censorship, they have that shit locked down. So as they lose control, it's going to create like a spiral, so like a death spiral. Like they're going to lose control, and then it's just going to collapse in on itself, and they're going to lose even more control, and then they're going to lose complete control. And we'll see what happens after that. What's kind of funny is I thought I had 10 years, like when I thought Donald Trump would get reelected and I'd have like a 10-year plan. And then I shortened that to a 5-year plan. And then
Now
I'm
you're
like,
at like 55 minutes.
yeah, well, and I joked, I kind of said it, kind of spur of the moment. We're not even going to make it to 2024. And it's like, yeah, we might not, we legit might not make it to 2024. Like in one term. Like look at the damage one senile pedophile did to the country that ruled the world. Like we ruled the world. And then one term of one senile pedophile completely destroyed
Everything that people have worked hundreds of years to
yeah,
build.
this mighty, well, I mean, technically the progressive empire, the big gay, it's only 100 years old. And actually, like Xi Jinping, there's like a hot mic video of Putin was walking him to his car, and Xi Jinping's, this is all on video, I'm not making this up. Xi Jinping was saying, there's going to be changes that haven't been seen in 100 years, and we're bringing it about together. And then Putin was like, I agree. And then they like waved to each other lovingly. So, like 100 years ago was the dawn of the big gay. It started with Woodrow Wilson in World War One, and then it was finalized under FDR in World War II. And then that's when the progressive control of the world really kicked off. And that was 100 years ago. And China's like, yeah, we're going to fuck this shit up. I'm like, fucking thank God someone's going to.
I got two super chats. One from Rooftop Korean for $10 with no message. Thank you very much. And Daniel Robinson says all economic data now, specifically unemployment, is fake.
Well, so I'm not one who trusts the government blindly.
Yeah, me either.
That should be fairly obvious. However, I have to look at I look at my everyday life, and then I compare if what I'm seeing around me is confirmed by what the government is saying. Well, then I don't have any reason to disbelieve the government. I understand that the government often does lie in order to benefit itself, but it's like let's compare COVID. So when people were saying, "Oh, COVID is the zombie virus from Resident Evil, is going to kill millions and millions of people," and I didn't see anybody dying, and then there were black riots, and then everyone's like, "Oh, guys, we can't stop the black riots because this is an important event, so we got to let the black people riot during a pandemic." And then I didn't see, like, we should have seen the streets littered with dead black people. Like, we're talking about rioting during a pandemic. If COVID was as deadly as it was supposed to be, all those protesters should have been dead. And yet, not only were they not dead, homeless people weren't even dying. Nobody was dying other than like really, really old people who die all the time. It's like what they're famous for. So what the government was saying and what my eyes were seeing were not in agreement. So I knew the government was full of shit. When it comes to the unemployment, I'm seeing help wanted signs and we're hiring signs everywhere. Everywhere is hiring. So, and I go into a business and there's like one guy there. And I'm like, hey, where's everyone else? And they're like, oh, we can't find anyone. So I'm seeing this in my daily life. I'm seeing businesses struggling to find workers. I'm seeing help wanted signs everywhere. So you tell me, oh, the government's lying. Okay, well, where's your proof? So the government says we have a tight labor market and low unemployment. I'm seeing that in my daily life. The only industries that are actually suffering layoffs are basically tech shedding their excess workers that should have been hired in the first place because of the bubble. I explained that before. And industries that are very sensitive to interest rate hikes, like banks and real estate. That's it. Those are the only places I'm really seeing layoffs, and there's jobs. There's plenty of jobs. Again, like Halsey was saying, if you want to build that plant over in Ohio, that that microchip or that semiconductor plant, they'll pay you a shit ton of money to go move out there and help. So if you're like completely hard up for a job, there's opportunities there. But if you live in some like, I don't know, some like washed up ghost town and you just don't want to move because this is your home, well, that's your fault that you're unemployed. It's because there's no jobs there. But I really don't think there's that many people even in that situation. It's not significant. So when my lived experience is in agreement with what the government is saying, I have no reason to doubt them. But if you have evidence, if you have proof that the government is lying, I'd love to see it, because what I'm seeing isn't showing that.
I saw a really interesting video the other day. They were interviewing one of the team leads for Facebook / Meta when the company first opened. And they said that Meta hired something like 30 people for recruitment. And for the first 2 years of their jobs, they had nothing to do because they weren't hiring. So, and anyone they were hiring, like the direct supervisors, would do it with basically people they knew. So they said for 2 years, they went into the office from 9 to 5 and did absolutely nothing. And were told, like, that's what you're here to do. Nothing.
Sure, why not? Well, I know in some tech companies they'll hire people just so nobody else hires them. But yeah, it's a weird industry.
They're also like really all in on diversity. So they'll hire 10 new black people just so they can show people they hired black people.
Well, I'm talking like, yeah, that all of that is true. And that as long as the money's flowing, they're happy to do it. It's when the money stops flowing that they stop hiring these people. And I've seen reports like the people they're firing, it's the diversity hires.
Sure. Even Netflix is doing it.
Yeah. So this isn't really unexpected. But if I'm not worried about, again, they hired a lot of people in 2020, 2021. They're shedding some of those people, but they're still net up. So this isn't even a recession based on that standard. Like, they're not worse off than they were before the pandemic. They're just shedding some of the excess weight now that the stock price is coming down. So I'm not saying like nobody's unemployed and it's all fake and everyone's employed. Like, yeah, we have about 3% unemployment, but anything below 4% is full employment. Like the average unemployment rate is usually around 5 or 6%, and that's just on like any given year, and it's actually below that right now. And a lot of that is like people are disabled because of long COVID. Wink. Some people are just milking welfare. So there's some people who are just left the labor force, which is also affecting the labor participation rate. But a lot of that had to do with low wages. So companies are finally starting to raise their wages, and so people are coming back into the labor force. So when people do that, though, when they first enter the labor force, it actually creates a short-term downward trend in unemployment. But then once they get a job, then they're good. So it's just it's fine. But basically, here's my homework to you is to actually look around your neighborhood. Are you seeing like a lot of closed down businesses, or are you seeing a lot of help wanted signs? Are the parking lots at your local stores full or empty? Like everywhere I go, the parking lots are full. Everywhere I go, there's help wanted signs. Now, maybe that's just my area. Maybe I live in a really lucky area. I don't know. But, as long as my lived experience confirmed what the government's saying, I'm like, okay, it seems legit to me. They could be lying. I'm not saying that they're definitely not lying. I'm just saying, like, I don't have any reason to believe they're lying because it's being confirmed by my eyes.
I don't necessarily disagree with you on that, but I do think they're lying about plenty. And the unemployment rate, it's a rough call because they've changed the definition now quite a few times to compare, apples to apples on now and in the past. And usually it's based on bullshit.
Well, the problem is before you had a welfare state, you could just basically be like, okay, where all, like, you have a census. You say, okay, here's all the working age men and how many of them are working. And then whoever isn't working, who's working age, who isn't disabled or something, they're unemployed. Easy peasy. But once you throw in a welfare state, you have people who are basically chronically on welfare, who completely who don't work, who just subsist off of welfare. You can't count them. If you count everyone who's basically on permanent welfare, you're going to have a permanent 20% unemployment rate. And then that is going to create like noise in the system, because that's, first of all, that's not actually reflective of the real economy. There's just a lot of people who are just sitting on welfare and don't want to work. So we created that system. There are people sitting on welfare who don't want to work. There are also people who are sitting on welfare who have a vaccine injury, who are now disabled because of the vaccine.
Sure.
And they're, like, so the labor force has taken a hit. But how do you have to make some adjustments, because you don't want to, it's kind of like the reason for share buybacks. Like, if you have a really good company, but your share price falls to like $1, people are going to assume your company is trash. Not your fault. It's just like maybe somebody, maybe like a partner sold his shares into the market, and now you're a penny stock, even though your company's really good. And because people are stupid, they just they rely on mental shortcuts to get through life. So in order to get your share price to something like that reflects the value of your company, you're going to do a share buyback. In reality, you shouldn't have had to do that, but because normies make these like surface level judgments, that's what they do. So if you allow the unemployment rate to be like inclusive of everything, you're going to have a permanent unemployment rate at least in the mid-teens, maybe even the low 20s. And that's going to create a panic among the normies, even though nothing is wrong. And it's just people on welfare. But their minds can't wrap their head around that. So you have to basically find a way to... It's the same reason why we do seasonal adjustments. Because if you don't see... Like, there are prices that change seasonally. Or there are certain things that change seasonally. And if you just give them the raw numbers, they're going to be like, oh my God. Like, for example, rents fell earlier in the year because seasonality. They're going to go back up, but like they go down during certain times of the year and they go up during other times of the year. But if you don't adjust for seasonality, people might look at that like, oh, rents are down. Oh, that must mean inflation is over, which is exactly what happened. And then it turns out, oh, that was just a seasonal adjustment. Rents aren't going down.
I mean, they even seasonally adjust the unemployment rates. So,
right.
like, you hear that all the time.
Because right after Christmas, a lot of companies lay off their Christmas employees.
Of course. Or their contracts even just expire. They don't even have to bother laying anybody off.
Right. So you don't want people to be like, oh my God, the economy is crashing. We have all these unemployed people. They're just temporary workers for Christmas. So the government, it's not that they're lying. I mean, they have to present the information in a way that the normies don't get confused, because people are stupid, unfortunately. And if you doubt me, remember the toilet paper bullshit during COVID, or remember when the Colonial Pipeline was hacked and people were filling up plastic totes and garbage bags full of gasoline? And
I do remember all of that.
There was no shortage. Like, the pipeline was shut down, but they used trucks to get the fuel out. There was actually no appreciable shortage of fuel. But because people started panic buying gasoline because they thought there would be a shortage, they created a shortage. And that is why the government can't be like open and transparent with people, because they are dumb, stupid, panicky animals. And the government has to they have to kind of like make sure that they don't get too scared. So that's the world we live in. But like, you could look at what the government's do. There's a difference between what the government does to like make the numbers not look scary, and just straight up like hiding things that make them politically look bad. Like, if we had an actual no shit like unemployment crisis, and people were losing their jobs and everyone was getting laid off, and the government was telling you that everything was fine, and that we have the lowest unemployment in 50 years and the economy's doing great, is there like everything's on fire and there's like people stabbing each other in the street. It's like Detroit but everywhere. Like that no one would buy that shit because again, it's like your eyes and what they're saying aren't agreeing. Like they're telling you one thing, but everything you're seeing and living is the opposite. So they're full of shit. So it's fine. At the end, it doesn't really matter. Like here's the thing: the recession narrative can be even more debunked because the people who are pushing the recession narrative simply don't know the difference between a short-term debt cycle and a long-term debt cycle. So a short-term debt cycle is what you see about every 10 years. You have a boom and bust cycle in the economy. You have like low interest rates and a lot of investment, and that creates a bull market. And then the economy overheats. There's some malinvestment. Interest rates go up. There's a recession, and then things reset. That happens about every 10 years. That's a short-term debt cycle. Then there's a long-term debt cycle. A long-term debt cycle only happens once every about 50 to 75, maybe to 100 years. Like once a century is how often long-term debt cycles happen. And this is where you have to have a deleveraging. This is where you have a currency reset. Now, the last time this happened was the 1970s when Nixon closed the gold window and caused a decade of stagflation. That's what we're facing here. We're not facing just your normal average run of the mill. Oh, the economy's a little hot. We got to cool it off, and then we're going to get back to business. This is a long-term debt cycle, and the problem is most people don't even know what that is. They have no concept that about once a century there's a financial reset, even in countries that don't collapse. Now, once every 4 centuries, usually you have like a new world order. You'll have an empire that, like the Dutch Empire, got replaced by the British Empire. Then the British Empire got replaced by the American Empire. Like that happens every about couple centuries. But even within one empire's reign, you're going to have a financial reset about once every 75 years, give or take 25 years. And that's just history. You look up the history, like you see these patterns overlapping throughout history. And that's what we're facing. We're facing a long-term debt cycle. And what you do during a short-term debt cycle will not work during a long-term debt cycle. During a short-term debt cycle, you're going to have a recession. You buy like utilities and healthcare and consumer staples and, or bonds. And then once the market bottoms, you go back into growth stock as the central banks stimulate the economy, and then you ride the bull market back up. But during a long-term debt cycle, when the monetary system is being reset, everybody gets wiped out. And the only people who don't get wiped out are the people who own hard assets. They're the only people who make it out. Now, they still, there's like a phase where the paper value will go. But if they own the hard assets, they're going to be made whole almost immediately. They'll recover almost immediately after the reset. But if you're like holding any kind of derivative or any kind of debt instrument, you're going to get completely wiped out.
Understatement of the century.
But people don't teach this in school. Like the only reason why I know this, because like if you go to business college, you actually want to be an economist for some reason. The only people who hire economists are the government, and the only economists they hire are Keynesians. So that's what they teach you in school. The only way to learn Austrian economics or actually like learn what you're doing, you have to actually have the intellectual curiosity to read books on your own. So you have to actually you have to enjoy reading and learning. And you have to like teach yourself. So the colleges will teach you like the basics, but then you have to go out and actually enjoy the field and read books on your own to actually like learn the stuff they're not teaching you in school. And almost nobody does that. And that's why their models keep failing, and that's why they keep having unexpected. Oh, this is so unexpected. I can't believe inflation's going up. I can't believe unemployment's not going up. It's so unexpected. It's like, yeah, your model is shit.
And always has been.
It always has been shit. They're just endlessly surprised that their models never work.
Well, it's the same with climate change. Climate change is the same thing. Every 10 years they come out with a new huge model, and they say we've only got so much time left. Then when we get to that point where we're at the so much time left, then all of a sudden they say, oh, well, we have a new model that says we got another 5 years.
Yeah, so the climate change is just a scam. Like they're just trying to scare you into giving them power and growing government and then taxing you and taking your freedom away. It's not even really. They're not even like shot. And here's how you know. So no matter which way the climate goes, whether it's global cooling, global warming, too much cold weather, not enough cold weather, too much hot weather, not enough hot weather, no matter what happens to the climate, the problem is always capitalism, and the answer is always communism.
Well, I mean, use your
it's just
terminology
a
correctly.
scam.
True communism has never been tried.
It's been tried. The problem is it can never be implemented.
I mean, I'm
It's
being
like,
completely sarcastic. I'm just saying that's what all the tankies say.
well, yeah, because in their mind, we have to implement heaven on earth, and only then we can say, okay, now that we have heaven on earth, now we're going to start the clock, and now at this point, from this point forward, now it counts. So if it fails now, then it counts. But now we had to wait till we got it fully implemented and we had literal heaven on earth, and then only that counts. So the problem is when you have a government that's trying to implement communism, communism in theory, it sounds it doesn't really work on paper, but it sounds good if you don't think about it too hard. The idea is it's like a family where you have the mom and the dad and the kids, and there's no money. Mom and dad don't charge the kids. They love the kids, and the kids love the parents. And so you have like kind of a people are doing their own role. Dad is doing his thing, mom's doing her thing, the kids are doing their thing, but they all love and take care of each other. And wouldn't it just be just super duper if society could work like that? If we all just had a role that we fulfilled, but we took care of each other, wouldn't that just be super duper? And it's like, okay, but how are you going to get from here to there? And the way they get from here to there is they have to centralize ownership of the means of production in the people. But who are the people? Like, who owns the property? The people can't own the property. Well, yeah, we'll have the government own the property. Like, okay. So realistically, in order to get to this utopian fantasy where everybody's one big happy family and we all love each other, we need to give the government ownership of everything. That way it can be the ownership owned by the people. Except what happens is the government isn't the people. The government are people, but they're like people with power. They're not you. You're not the government.
No,
Like,
the government is the people that spit on you when you're walking down the street.
yeah, the
I'll be
government
right
are
back in 2 minutes, okay?
okay.
Just 2 minutes.
I'll
Keep
well,
going.
I mean, you've heard this, so I guess I'll just talk to the audience. So you have the government is not like it's not like an avatar of the will of the people. That's bullshit. And that's the central problem with all these utopian communist socialist models is they assume that the will of the people manifests through the government, but that's not true. The government is made up of people who have their own families, their own self-interest, their own wants and desires, and they simply look out for themselves. So once you give them all the property, all the power, everything, and you're like, okay, now that the government has all the property and all the power, they're going to do the will of the people, and we're going to own all this stuff vicariously through the government, and now we'll all own it, and because we all own it, nobody owns it, except in reality the government owns it. And the government just says, hey, cool, thanks for giving us all your property, I guess you're our slaves now. And then you're like, oh, what, slavery? But I thought we were going to be equal, we're all going to hold hands and love each other. It's like, nope. There's a gulag, and it's got your name on it, and you can go turn big rocks into little rocks. And that's like, oh no, this wasn't real communism then. This was a fake communism. But that's the thing. Once you look at the process, once you get to the phase where you give the government ultimate power and you give them ownership of all the property, why would anyone with that kind of power give it up? Once you have all that power and property, why would you be like, okay, time for the government to dissolve now? And that's what Marx theorized. Once the government had ultimate power, they would wither away. I shit you not. The government would wither away because reasons, except that would never happen. Like, look at children. If you spoil a child, they're not going to like just, nod their head and let all this power and control they have just wither away because it's the right thing to do. And that's the fatal flaw. And it just doesn't, it's never worked. It will never work. It can't work. When you try to explain this to a communist, they just deny human nature. They're like, oh, well, if we just, teach children right and we raise them better, then they'll automatically be these new people who will do these things that people aren't doing now because they'll be better, because there is no such thing as an intrinsic human nature. It's all socially conditioned. Except no. Self-interest is not some kind of socially conditioned thing. It's intrinsic to not just human life, but all life. All life seeks to survive and reproduce. And because the world is a mutually eating society, the only way one organism can succeed is by destroying numerous other organisms that are also trying to succeed. So no matter where you look, no matter what you try to do, there's always competition, and there's always winners and losers. And there's always life seeking its own interest, always. So it is what it is. But they're never going to give it up because they don't want to get a job. As long as they can, make some kind of pseudo intellectual argument for giving them free stuff, the ride will never stop. And Halsey's still gone, but I have nothing more to say. What am I going to do now? I'm kind of bored talking about the markets too. Like, you either get it or you don't. If you're still on the the recession narrative, and you think that the economy is going to crash, even as there's bank bailouts in real time, even as we have full employment, that's fine. You do you. You go ahead and you buy your short duration bonds. You hold your cash. You buy your crypto, and you go for it.
Holding cash is probably the stupidest thing you could do right now. Literally, I mean, you just take your money and burn it at this point.
Well, no. So if we were in a short-term debt cycle and we were facing a recession, like on the way down, you want to be either in cash or bonds. And then once you kind of get towards the bottom, then you want to sell all those things. You want to rotate into usually financials and real estate are what go up at the bottom of the market, because they're the first beneficiaries of stimulus. When the Fed announces stimulus, it traditionally goes first into financials and real estate because they cut interest rates and whatnot. You can also invest in growth stocks and tech and crypto. Like those are going to go. Those are going to do great when there's stimulus. When if the Fed cuts rates to zero and starts printing money, then all those great things. The problem is, for that to work, there cannot be inflation. That's the thing that's different this time. And the belief is, if this was a short-term debt cycle, the inflation would be manageable and it would go away with the recession. But it's not. And the reason why it's not is because it's being caused by government spending, which is going up. Deficits are actually, this kind of scared me. In 2023, just in the first 3 months, deficits are up 50% compared to last year.
I know.
2020, we're talking about 2022. Last year, our deficits are up 50%. And receipts are down. Oh, by the way, if you look up government receipts, like tax receipts, they tend to be pretty flat, except when the stock market is going up, because all those capital gains tax income. But now that the stock market isn't going up and they're not making all those capital gains, tax receipts are down. So deficits are up, tax receipts are down. The Fed's printing money,
and they're trying to pass even more laws that are going to reduce tax receipts.
Yeah, so someone asked me, like, I talk about rotating based on the fundamentals, and they're like, what should I look for? Like, it's really simple. If the government ever stops printing money, cuts spending, makes peace with oil and gas and starts increasing supply, starts building refineries and starts approving mines, then I would consider maybe the winds have changed and maybe we should rotate into something else. But I literally see nothing None of those things are happening at all, despite an ongoing energy crisis. Like the price of natural gas in Europe, it just went up again, and yet nothing. There's no. Europe is still moving forward with their like, oh, we got to get rid of the cow farts. The cow farts are the problem. It's so dumb, but that's what can you do?
Well, did you hear
So
Biden approved a new oil drilling project in Alaska? And then all the environmentalists freaked out because, after all, he's supposed to be anti-oil. And so what he said was he then refroze the project and said they have to do a study on the moose population because moose are the most common form of greenhouse gas. So they have to see, will this increase or decrease the moose population?
well, they know the answer. It's just what they do is they drag things out for decades, and they it's fine. What's funny is the reason for the environmental movement. It's a communist thing. Everything's communism. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's literally true. Earth Day is Lenin's birthday. Look it up. But the purpose of the environmental movement was to pave the way for nationalization. They attack industries that are like food, energy, and financing are the three big industries that need to be nationalized. You really can't have an authoritarian communist dictatorship if you don't nationalize those industries.
Sure.
So they need to create a crisis like that's why they will never approve nuclear power.
Which is insane.
Well, if you actually take them at their word, if you think they actually give a shit about the environment, then it's insane that they're anti-nuclear power. When you understand that they don't give a fuck about the environment, they are trying to bring down capitalism. They want to create an energy crisis in order to nationalize the energy sector. Then everything they do makes perfect sense. If you always understand these are communists who want to nationalize the energy sector, the environmental movement makes absolute perfect sense. But if you think they actually care about the planet Earth, nothing they do makes any fucking sense. So again, I'm not one who trusts government. I'm very distrustful of government, but I think for myself, like when the government says something, I listen and then I look around and I do my own research. Sometimes the government's lying, sometimes they're not lying. Sometimes they're run by communists, sometimes they're not. You got to live in this world. You can't just, I don't know, be I don't even know. Sometimes, but yeah, shit's gonna get real. Shit's gonna get real bad in the next 6 months. And I'm being generous when I say 6 months. It's probably gonna like go off the rails in the next couple months, but we'll say 6 months. More banks will fail.
More banks. I mean, there a proposal was just introduced in Congress today to lift FDIC insurance to $2 million, as opposed to 250,000.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, I mean,
why not? Why not? I mean, I don't see a downside to that. I mean, like, so people say, look, Peter Schiff was on a Fox Business thing, and they were like, but the FDIC, they only have like 100 billion. Where's the money? Peter Schiff's like, they're going to print it. Like, where do you think the money's going to come from? They're going to print it, obviously.
I mean, that old gay Republican talking point of, but where's the money coming from? Like, how are we going to pay for it? Like, they don't even try anymore. They just assume that everyone's going to just ignore it.
So there's actually interesting kind of side effect for all this money printing and inflation. Money printing and inflation actually exacerbates income inequality and wealth inequality because rich people own assets that actually go up with inflation, whereas poor people don't. Now, high inflation makes their debts go away relatively, assuming that wages go up and keep pace, which they always lag. But it's bad for the banks. But assuming you're just going to bail everyone out and print money, cool. The rich people who own the assets will actually become richer, and the average person, their standard of living is going to take a massive shit. The irony is people point that out, like, oh, the inflation actually benefits the rich people. The rich people caused this. And it's like, okay, what's your plan? Like, oh, more welfare. It's like you realize that's literally what's causing the inflation. It's all the welfare that you're demanding the government give you that they can't pay for, that they have to print the money to pay for, that's causing the inflation that's making you poorer. And I'm fine with an inflationary tax because we're never going to get a flat tax or a fair tax, but inflation hits everything. Everybody pays more for everything. It's not like a progressive tax where, these people pay nothing and these people pay 25% and then you pay, 50%. No, no, no. When the price of milk doubles, everybody pays more for milk. Everybody pays the same additional tax on food, everything. Now, rich people who, drive more, have bigger houses, they're obviously paying more because they're using more. But it's fair. It's just like if we had a flat tax, everybody paid 18%. All right. So rich, poor, everyone pays 18% of their income. Rich people would still pay more because 18% of a million is more than 18% of 100,000, which is more than 18% of 50,000. So rich people would still pay the majority of taxes, but at least everyone be paying. We don't have that. We have the system where, the more than half of Americans don't even pay income taxes.
Which is ridiculous, because if you ever tell someone that, if you ever go, hey, listen, we have probably the most progressive tax system in the entire world, they look at you like you just told them the moon landing didn't happen.
Well, I saw like a screen cap tweet where it says like everybody wants to eat the rich until they learn that the global 1% is $35K a year. So if you make $35K a year, you're in the global 1%, which if you live in a first world country, you are the global 1%. So then all of a sudden, no one wants to eat the rich anymore when it's them. But they look at, even though they're the global 1%, they look at the 1% of the 1%, and they're like, well, let's eat the rich, not realizing that they're the rich. It's like all these college kids. Like, first of all, only about a third of Americans even go to college. If you went to college, you are in the upper third of Americans. And then you're talking about how oppressed you are and how the world owes you something. It's all bullshit. And it's because it's like it's too close. Nobody appreciates that like they're actually much better off than other people because they only see their life. And also there's like I can't remember the word, like women do this especially. They look up the men who are the millionaires and billionaires and the CEOs. And they say, oh, why are all these men in all these leadership positions? Where's the women? They don't notice all the homeless men. They don't notice all the men dying in war because they don't matter. Only the men, I think it's called the pinnacle bias or something. You notice the people you're comparing yourself to. So people notice the rich, like, oh, you're richer than me, you're evil, not knowing that they're much richer than most of the world. The rest of the world looks at them as the 1% and they want to eat them. But they don't appreciate that because they don't understand how the world is outside of the little bubble where they're just little old me and the world owes me something because I don't want to work. So this is why, like, I hate to say this, but like I'm kind of glad for the clot shot because we really need to cull the herd. And this is probably all the ways to do it. This is one of the better ways. Like, I wasn't looking forward to a civil war or like a big, and also the people who are, all gung ho, do what the government says. Those are the same people who will turn you in. They're the ones who would like, tell the Nazi that the Jews are under the floor. Like those are those kind of people. The fucking mass Karens, they'd be like, yes, the Jews are under the floor. There they are. Give me my cookie. So yeah, I'm glad they're dead. I'm glad they're gonna die. They're not dead yet. They'll be dead soon. God, thank God. It'd be nice if those people like weren't pieces of shit, but they are, and there's really no cure for them because they actually think that by conforming and being part of the group, that they're the good guys. They don't understand like what they're fighting for. Like, put them in Nazi Germany, they'd be doing the Sieg Heil and all that shit, just like everyone else, because that's what they are. They're just NPCs. They're just filler humans that just do what they're told. They're basically just fit for slavery. And the problem is, I'm fine, just like with BDSM relationships, I'm fine with people who are into that sort of thing doing it among themselves, as long as I'm not forced to participate. So if you want to find somebody who's going to give you cock and ball torture, go for it. But if let's say BDSM people were the majority of the country and they passed laws mandating cock and ball torture, I wouldn't like that. Even though you're into it and you're fine with that. I'm not fine with that. But that's what they do. These fucking NPCs are like, well, I'm an NPC and I like being told what to do. So I'm going to pass a law and I'm going to make you do what the government tells you to do too.
I mean, there's no place more apparent for that than the gun control debate. Like the amount of statements of like, I wouldn't need an AR-15 to go hunting. Like, think of how ridiculous that statement is.
Well, those people will never hunt in their life. Like, even if they were given the opportunity, they would turn it down. The argument for gun control is such a stupid argument because you're talking about taking away a tool. A tool. Now that tool can be misused, but like way more people die of like vehicular homicide and like car collisions than die of accidental shootings or even intentional shootings. So are we going to ban cars because hey, if we save one life, it's worth banning all cars? No, because cars are too useful. Everybody needs a car. People understand the utility of a car, but more importantly, almost everybody owns a car. So we're not going to ban cars, even though it would save way more lives than banning guns. But guns are like, it's a tool that a lot of people need, particularly if you live in like a rural area and you have like varmints and, bears and moose or something, you need a gun. But these dipshits who live in the city, they don't need a gun. So, but the only people they see with guns are the people who mug them. So they think by banning guns, they can get rid of the muggers. The irony is the way you get rid of muggers is you stop pussyfooting around with crime. You do like what El Salvador did. You start locking up gang members. You just round them up. You put them in a fucking a dark hole and you just bury them. That's how you deal with the fucking crime. If we crack down on criminals and gangs, the crime rate would plummet. I mean, these people are not like hiding. They're not like hard to identify. Like the cops know who these people are. But because the best example of this is the homeless problem. So in California, there's a really bad homeless problem, in case you didn't know. And the people who own businesses in the downtown area are begging the city to do something about these homeless people who are literally sleeping outside of their business, shitting everywhere, doing heroin, and scaring customers away. Like if you're going to go, like, let's say you want to go downtown and you want to eat at a nice restaurant, and outside the restaurant, there's a fucking homeless guy shooting up heroin and beating off into a pile of shit. You're going to lose your appetite and you're going to go away. But the business owner can't do anything about these homeless people. Like there's actually video. A guy like took a garden hose and was spraying a homeless woman who was sleeping outside of he had like an art studio. And someone put it up online and they were like oh, how dare you pick on this poor woman? And that's the problem. The people who actually have to bear the burden of these homeless people affecting their businesses, they're begging the city to do something. But then you have the 90% of people who don't live downtown, who don't have businesses downtown. They live in the suburbs. They live in the fucking Alps. They live in some vineyard town. Like they don't have anything to do with homeless people. They don't see a homeless person. So they have the benefit, the privilege of virtue signaling about how kind and generous they are and how loving they are towards the homeless. So they vote against anything anyone tries to do to deal with the homeless problem. It gets shot down by the people who don't live there and don't have to deal with it, because they look at it like, oh, you're spraying this homeless woman with water just because she's like begging for money outside of your business and harassing your customers. Oh, you're a heartless person. Okay, give me your address. I'll send them to your house. You can let them sleep in your guest bed. They won't be homeless anymore. So her name is Eleanor. She has schizophrenia. She's going to be your new roommate. No one. So it's just. It's just virtue signaling bullshit. People want to pretend. The best example was a social experiment. They didn't just do this one time. They did this multiple times in multiple countries. They talked to a man on the street interview, like, oh, hey, how do you feel about the refugee crisis? I'm like, oh, I think it's important that we help people. Like, oh, would you let a refugee live in your house? Like, oh, I sure would. Okay, well, here's Ahmed. He's going to live in your house now. I'm like, oh, no, I can't. Ahmed can't live with me. So but voting doesn't incur a cost. Virtue signaling doesn't incur a cost. So these fucking retards keep hurting people because they want to broadcast their virtue about how generous they are with things that don't affect them and don't cost them anything. And that's the biggest argument for a net taxpayer voter system, because then the votes that people cast actually cost them money. They are personally affected by how they vote. And so they're going to be very prudent about their votes because they're paying for everything. But universal suffrage is a horrible idea because you get these virtue signaling retards who just vote based on not even what they feel. They vote because they obviously, like that social experiment proves, they don't actually want refugees living with them when it affects them personally, but they want to tell everyone they do as long as it doesn't affect them, so that people will think they're a good person. It's all fake. It's just fake virtue because it doesn't cost them anything, but it has real world consequences when they vote down laws, or when they put people in power, or when they, do this, that, and the other. Like, people's lives are affected by these people who, and then once it starts affecting them, they change their tune.
Oh
Like,
yeah, when the George Floyd riots were happening and people went into the suburbs, all of a sudden it was like, no, law and order. We love back the blue. We need help out here.
yep. Oh, what's funny were these black celebrities who lived in these white gated communities, who were like freaking out on social media, like when the black rioters came to burn their neighborhood down. Like, yeah, burn down that Foot Locker, burn down that AutoZone. Oh no, they're at my gated white community. Oh, this is so bad. Where are the police? There was like I saw a video, so funny. There are these black rioters who were coming up on an Asian business, and the Asians, they don't fuck around. So the Asian guy pulled out a rifle, says, "Get the fuck out of here!" And they're like, "Oh, you can't do that." And he shot, and like a woman got shot in the arm. And the guy's like, "Oh my god, you got shot! Oh my god!" So they pull out his phone, calls 911. Like, "Oh, someone got shot." Like, okay, like, are you rioting? Like, yeah. It's like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, we're trying to stop you from burning down the city, and you're calling like, "Oh no, my girlfriend got shot because we were trying to burn down an Asian man's business and he shot us." Like, yeah, that will happen. I got a hot take for you. Maybe don't try to burn people's businesses down, and they won't shoot you. It's crazy.
Speaking of burning it all down, have you seen what's going on in France?
Okay, so here's the thing. I originally believed it was just about the pension reform. Some people have reached out to me. Again, this it might be gay op, who knows, like, but people who claim that they actually like know what's going on. What I'm hearing is it's not just about pension reform. There's also people who are protesting NATO and protesting the Great Reset and like the whole World Economic Forum thing, but the media is basically saying, "Oh, this is just a pension reform riot." When that's part of it, but it's actually they're trying to basically uh remember the Canadian truckers? They were protesting vaccine mandates, and they tried to paint them as, "Oh, they're a bunch of white supremacists." Like, that's what
Right.
the media does. So they can't ignore the riots. They can't pretend that they're not happening, but they can pretend like they don't want to say, "Hey, this is an anti-NATO riot. This is an anti, World Economic Forum Great Reset riot." So, saying that it's about pension reform, it it's more palatable to their agenda. So they're just kind of like sweeping everything under the rug, saying that this is all just about pension reform. And it's all and I kind of fell for it too, because I was like, "Oh, these people they won't riot for their freedom. They won't riot for their children, but they'll riot for their fucking welfare." But apparently I was mistaken. So there is, and I don't know. Like, again, these might be anecdotal examples. I don't know. I have no way of knowing. It's not like there's going to be like, journalists or, somebody like doing some kind of scientific measurement to determine like what these riots are composed of and why people are there and what they're protesting. We have no idea. But yeah, the riots are out of control. Whether or not they actually are simply about welfare, or if they are like broader than that, it's just being suppressed by the media. But
Well,
yeah,
I saw a video. They burned down the government building, the town, the court, and the county courthouse in Bordeaux.
well, that's something. I remember I saw an article, the trash collectors are protesting. and the government said like because there's this trash piling up in France and like nobody's taking it, and they're saying that if these trash collectors don't stop protesting and get this trash, they're going to like pass a law and say that basically force them to work. Like they're not allowed to protest anymore because they're too essential, so they have to work or they'll be arrested and go to jail. And it's like, I don't think you understand like how this works. Like these people, like you need these people to pick up your trash, and instead of listening to their demands and negotiating with them, you're threatening to arrest them and make them work for free, i.e. slavery. It's like, I don't think you understand how any of this works. So yeah, France is a shithole. What can I say? But it's good to see some nice, healthy, violent protests once in a while.
That's the way I felt about it. Like, I mean, the people that are there protesting about the retirement ages, like, I don't really care about any of that.
But here's the thing. Here's how you know it's not like a fake gay AstroTurf George Soros funded gay op. Is they're actually attacking government buildings. They're not burning down local businesses. They're not terrorizing suburbs. They're actually burning down. They're attacking the government. Like when leftists protest, they'll burn down random neighborhoods and terrorize people. Supposedly like, oh man, a cop killed a black man. Quick, let's burn down this CVS pharmacy. That'll teach them. The cops won't mess with us next time. Once we burn down this CVS. But yeah, the other thing too is like, if it's the cops killing black people, why not, I don't know, burn down the police station? Wouldn't that make more sense than burning down CVS and Foot Locker and Burger King? But nope, it's because that's a leftist gay op AstroTurf protest. But like when people are like the government's the problem. Even if you're a Black Lives Matter supporter, and you're against police brutality, well, the police they don't exist in a vacuum. They're government employees. They work for the mayor. They're part of the government. Why are you burning down a CVS?
And then all those businesses leave.
Right. So that's the plan. But the thing is, when people protest and attack government buildings, then like, oh, this is an actual protest. This is like the people are actually fed up. It's not just that they're protesting because they were paid to by George Soros or Al Sharpton or whatever fucking flavor of the week AstroTurf bullshit's going on.
For sure. Everybody, just so you know, this is last call. We got about another 5 minutes to go. It's already 1 a.m. here, and I got to be up in 3 hours.
All right. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. Again, it's my fault. I take full responsibility for being late.
As I said, I wasn't even upset. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like, we could have rescheduled or anything. I just enjoy having you on the show. Oh, real quick, $5 for Why Not Go. Just here to support. Wish you, Halsey, would interact more on the Morning Constitutional. I like your input. I interact when there's something to say. If I happen to just agree with everything that TFM is saying, I'm usually just going to go, oh yeah, that's right, or that's 100% true, because there's no reason to look for fights.
Right.
Yeah, like there's no reason to look for fights if there isn't one there in the first place.
Actually, somebody, I saw somebody messaged me and they said you were wrong about Netanyahu. Apparently, they're Israeli, and they were saying that like Netanyahu he's not like right wing at all.
They're saying he isn't?
Yeah, they're saying he's not. Like they're saying he's not right wing at all, and you don't know what you're talking about.
Netanyahu is the equivalent of a Republican here. And I don't mean like a Trump or a Gosar or a Rand Paul. I mean like a John McCain.
Oh, Jesus. That's not right wing.
No, he never has been right wing, but he's always been a prime minister over fairly right wing governments. Like he very rarely has sat in a government with left wing parties. But he himself, like, not only is he basically left wing, but he's also a tremendous cuck. Like, I mean, every time you put a little pressure on that guy, he folds like a cheap suit.
Okay, I think that's kind of the. I think you insinuated that he was like this based and red pilled, character in Israeli society, that like the leftist Jews hate him because he's too based.
No, the leftist Jews just hate him for the same reason they hate Trump and DeSantis here. Like, it's to them, he's not one of them. So to them, he's as far right as they come. The only difference you're seeing this time around with him is who he's beholden to. In a government in Israel, like, one party hasn't won an election where they had a majority in parliament. I don't think ever, but if not, it's been at least 50 years. So he has, like, usually the people he picks are more centrist, or even left wing sometimes. Like, it's just the way that he is. But now that the only way he could have a government at all was to bring in the ultra orthodox and the ultra right wing, and he's almost in a no-win situation, because this whole judicial reform thing, obviously he wants it too, but he would, if this was Netanyahu and any other time being prime minister, he would just find a way to give them everything they wanted and make pretend he wanted to do that in the first place. But now, like, his coalition members, the parties that are in the government with him, they'll leave. They've already told him that. They're like, listen, if you cuck on this, we're just going to leave and you'll lose power. So it really, I never said he was. In fact, like, when people ask me who I voted for when I was over there, I never voted for Netanyahu even once. Like, and this time I probably would have if I was there, just because the stakes were so high, and there really were only two candidates that had the ability to form a government, and I didn't want to see Netanyahu not be able to, because the alternative was too bad. But usually I vote for some, like, lunatic right winger who barely is, like, allowed to run because they're considered too, like, based.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't follow Israeli politics at all. I don't really care. So
No, and you know what? I've always said that people shouldn't care. But the only reason that you should care right now about what's going on in Israel is because it's the same thing that's going on in Brazil. It's the same thing that's going on in France, the Netherlands, like Viktor Orban, Poland, who basically lost. Like, this is when the left, when a politician says they want to do something, that the left or the cathedral or the WF, whatever you want to call it, when they say, we're not going to listen to that, fuck that, it's bad, right? Like, you should pay attention, because they're going to use these tactics against us if they already haven't. That's the only reason you should care a little bit, is to see, like, okay, what are they doing this to? Like, look at how the media is lying about most of the positions that he takes and what's actually going on. Then, like, that meme you sent me before was so well done. Like, how do we know the moon landing was real?
Oh yeah, well, yeah, it actually is secretly brilliant. So I sent this to Halsey. I'll just explain it to the audience. So I sent him like a meme or like a screen cap tweet, and someone was saying, like, the reason why he knows the moon landing was real was that there's no negative consequences when you say it's not real. People who say that the moon landing was faked aren't debanked. They're not unpersoned. They're not fired from their job. They're not censored. So that's like a good rule of thumb.
It really is.
If there's a conspiracy theory that there's no consequences for indulging in, like, you say the world is flat, nobody cares. Nobody is like depersoning, debanking, deplatforming anybody who believes the world is flat or that the moon landing was faked. But then you get into things that, when you talk about COVID, people are losing their job. They're getting depersoned. We talk about stolen elections. People are getting, unpersoned, deplatformed. So it's like, oh, okay, like, that's a really good rule of thumb. Like, how are people being treated who believes this thing? If they're being, like, horribly repressed by the government, then there's probably something to this conspiracy theory.
I mean, it's so true, but I mean, most people don't realize, like, there was a significantly large anti-vaxxer movement before COVID. Like, people think that the country just became anti-vaccine because of COVID. Like, there was just nobody took them seriously because nobody cared.
Well, and also the thing that was the other thing too. So if you were anti-vaxxer and you did not vaccinate your child, people would joke about your child getting sick and dying while all the other kids were perfectly fine, because that's how vaccines work. This fucking retarded idea that we all need to get vaccinated or else somebody else is going, their vaccine won't work unless you get yours, is so fucking retarded. It never made any sense. But we know now. I mean, we don't know. Like, you should have put the puzzle pieces together at this point, unless you're a fucking idiot, that this wasn't about health. This wasn't about like fighting COVID. They wanted to push everybody to get the vaccine to kill you. That's what this was about. Like, why did they ban ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? Like, they've actually been proven effective, but they banned them anyway because they wanted to force you to get the vaccine. They pushed it through. Like, you could argue, well, no, it's not about killing everyone. It's just about lining Pfizer's pockets. Like, okay, why does the government want to line Pfizer's pockets? Like, oh, because the government, they want to get rich buying Pfizer stock. The government has a money printing machine, right?
Yeah,
like,
they don't need your money.
They don't need to go wheeling and dealing with Pfizer stock to get rich. They have a magical money printing machine. And you see, like, they do money laundering bullshit all the time. Like, look at Ukraine. There was like this whole like money laundering operation. Look at fucking Burisma with Hunter Biden and Nancy Pelosi's son and
Mitt
all that
Romney's
shit.
son and Anthony
Mitt Romney's
Blinken's son.
Yeah, that's
her daughter. I mean,
yeah,
Pelosi's daughter.
right. So you don't need to, like, you look at these politicians that they get into office and they become multimillionaires within their first term. They go from like, having a middle class, maybe upper middle class income, and now they're multimillionaires. And the reason why is, every time they give a speech, because you can't bribe politicians, but you can pay them $1 million to give a speech. So, I just hire Nancy Pelosi to give a 10-minute speech and I pay her $100 million.
Yep. Well,
now,
Nancy Pelosi is a bad example because she just trades stock. She doesn't even have to be paid to speak.
Well, but I'm saying, like, that's how the corruption actually works. Like, you don't need to, like, this idea that this is all about Pfizer stock, whatever. Like, okay, so you buy the Pfizer stock and then you create a pandemic and you make everybody get vaccinated so that the Pfizer stock goes up. Okay, what, you doubled your money, tripled your money? I don't even know how much Pfizer stock went up, but it didn't go up that much. Like, you can just write checks to yourself if you're that powerful. If you're the kind of person that can engineer a pandemic and a national response in order to force people to get vaccinated, you have the power to print yourself any amount of money you want. So this narrative that this is about Pfizer is retarded. No, like, this is clearly bigger than just getting rich off of fucking a pharmaceutical company.
That's been one of those leftist arguments that I've never... I think it's just as stupid as saying, like, oh, it's all the Jews' fault or it's all the blacks' fault or anything like that. But this idea that, like, oh, they're just doing it so they could get richer. It's like, the person has $9 billion. They know they can't get much richer.
Yeah, exactly. So what do they... But then the thing is, the World Economic Forum is very open about killing the useless eaters. And they, you have the Georgia Guidestone talk about we need to get our global population below 1 billion. There's just too many people on the planet. We need to, like, lower our global population. So, like, it's right there in plain sight. Like, they want to kill people to cull the herd because they think there are too many people. And look at their ideology. Look what it comes to, like, when it comes to everything, whether it's climate change or whether it's, fighting inflation. What's their response to fighting inflation? Destroy the economy. Not increase production, not cut government spending, just cause a depression. What's their answer to climate change? Stop having babies.
And cars.
Look what they're doing in Canada with this assisted suicide. They're selling the organs.
Are they?
Yeah, they're having them donate the organs after they're euthanized by the state. So, like, you have Canada just murdering people, and they're trying to move it to children. They're trying to, like, open it up to where children can have assisted suicide if they're, like, retarded or something. It's straight up eugenics.
I mean, if I'm not mistaken, that was the whole, like, controversy, like, 6 months ago. I think they passed that already, where they can recommend it to children.
You might be right, but my point is like, so again, all the clues are in front of you. You have Canada euthanizing people who are the undesirables, we'll just call them, and then you have them openly talking about lowering the global population and causing crises to take power. And now here is a forced vaccine that is causing heart attacks and AIDS. And
So
and it's
fucked up.
like, yeah, it's it's like one of those crazy like movie plots. Like you wouldn't think this was real. Like the government did not just give people something that's going to cause heart attacks on purpose. And it's like, yeah, they kind of did.
Yeah,
They kind of sort of absolutely fucking did.
they
And
kind of sort of still are.
well, yeah, you know what? I just saw an article this morning. There's a new COVID variant. It's called shit. It's called Kraken. It's the Kraken variant. And it's like, okay, great. So I'm gonna tell everyone I know, to get boosted. We're all in this together. I'm gonna keep doing this until they fucking start keeling over. And then once they're dead, I'm like, thank God all these fucking cucking NPCs are gone. Fuck. Like now these fucking dipshits are out of the way, then we can actually. Here's the thing: the people who love freedom are only about 15% of the population at best. So there's no way 15% can really make headway against 85%. But let's see what the vaccine does. Maybe we'll wake up one day and our numbers won't be so, we won't be outnumbered so much. Maybe we can start, making something happen.
I mean, not to offend anyone in the order, but if you see on the whole how Gen Z is just so retarded and so out of line with like normal thought, I don't have much hope that things are going to swing in our direction.
It's because of well, I mean, what's funny is we recognize the grooming that's happening with the drag queen story time and all that stuff, but we're completely oblivious to the grooming that's been happening for 100 years. Every generation has been groomed by the left. It's just that the left has gotten more and more brazen each generation because they keep winning. So they indoctrinate this generation of children to believe X, and then they move the needle more to the left. So then they indoctrinate their children to believe Y, and then they move the needle more to the left. And now we're basically at the end. So now that they're like trying to indoctrinate them into pedophilia, people are starting to notice, hey, wait a minute, they're trying to groom my children. It's like they've been grooming your children. They've groomed you. Like we're a generation, we're 100 years in to generation after generation of indoctrinated and groomed public school children that are made to believe by default leftist ideology. Now, sometimes, you get out of school, you join the real world, you get a job, you start paying taxes, you get a wake-up call about how like, oh, fuck the government, I want to keep my money. The problem is now that like, especially like Gen Z, here's what I think is going on. They've just lived under crisis after crisis. Like their life is just one crisis after another, and rent is the most expensive it's ever been.
Oh yeah, but like with a bullet,
Right. So you've lived your entire life. You basically were born and raised in nothing but crises and war and anxiety, and now you can't afford anything. And what the fuck are you supposed to do? It's like if you're a boomer and you wasted your life and spent all your money, that was your fault. But if you're like 16 and you're like trying to get a job and like move out and start your life and you can't afford shit, and like everything's just prohibitively expensive and you have no future through no fault of your own, what are you going to do? Like, what could you realistically do? What ideology are you going to find appealing? You're going to find the ideology which is talking about let's burn the system down. It's those greedy capitalists, those evil white people. They did this to us. And the argument goes, and again, just like that whole argument of this was all about Pfizer stock, it makes a surface level kind of sense if you're stupid. So what you do is you look out like, okay, well, this country, America, is capitalist and it has white people everywhere. So obviously the problem is white people and capitalism. And it makes a certain kind of intuitive level of sense if you don't like dig too deep or think about it too hard. But you're talking about people who've been abused their whole life, set up for failure, and are hopeless. And I don't mean they're like hopeless losers. I mean they have no hope. They personally have no hope. They see the system has failed them in every way possible, and they don't know how they're going to claw their way out of this. And they have these ideologues who are now they're in their ear telling them that it's white people's fault and it's capitalism's fault. And, they don't know any better. And they've been indoctrinated into leftism their entire life. So why would they do anything else other than be super woke and retarded? They don't understand that, like, the problem is, like, when I try to get people to understand the problem is the welfare state, they literally have, like, that is so beyond anything they can conceive of. Like, the problem can't be the welfare state. And then when I carefully walk them through the steps, how it literally is the welfare state, like, it's actually making everything worse. All this free stuff that you're demanding from the government. I had somebody, he's like a black guy, and I was telling him all this stuff. He's like, okay, I agree with you that welfare dependence is the problem, but what do we do about, like, reparations and police brutality? I'm like, okay, what would you do about reparations and police brutality? It's like, oh, we got to give black people checks. It's like, we just got finished explaining how welfare dependence is the problem in the black community, and you agreed with me, and now you think that we need to give black people more checks. Do you understand, like, the words you're saying are retarded? And he just, like, he got quiet, and he didn't know he didn't know what to say. But he wants free stuff. He wants free stuff, even though he acknowledges that the free money has destroyed the black community and made them welfare dependent, and that needs to stop. He also wants more free stuff. Like, he just can't wrap his head around. It's like a fat person. You tell them they need to lose weight. They intellectually get it, but they also really want to eat cake. Like, this cake is delicious, and they can't say no. Even though they know they're supposed to say no, like, it hurts. It hurts to say no. They don't want to change. And what could you do? What can you possibly do with these people?
There is absolutely nothing you can do.
All you can do is just encourage them to get boosted. Tell them we're all in this together. And if their chest starts hurting, that means it's working, because the disease that's been infecting America is going to be cured soon. And just give them, like, a knowing wink. Don't worry, my friend. That disease that's infecting America, we're going to eradicate it thanks to that booster. I'm like, oh, you mean COVID? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why not?
That's what I mean. COVID.
Oh, how did I not think of that before?
Yeah, COVID. That's what I'm talking about. Eradicating COVID. That's the disease.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for tuning in. I got to get some sleep before tomorrow. Thank you very much, TFM, and I'm hopefully going to see you guys on Saturday night.
All right, man. Yeah, you're always welcome.
Awesome.
Take care.
Have a great night, everybody. Bye-bye.
My fellow Americans, tonight I am speaking to you because there is a growing humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border.
In all honesty, a border wall or steel slats won't work. But great bodies of water will separate us from the horrible Mexican rapists. Introducing the 2019 Trump Great Border Moat. Stocked with the most aggressive penis fish, incredible man-eating alligators, and unbelievable genetically modified moose-cocked rape dolphins, as well as flying, migrant-eating sharkfish. So incredible.
I swore to protect our country, and that is what I will always do. So help me God. Thank you, and good night.